Hello guys, welcome back to Custom Gamer. This is part 4 of Spherical Nightmares by WizardExt, aka David Lundvall. This is the final part in this video series, as we're almost at the end. So the mod has kind of shifted into this kind of almost like a horror mode now, I suppose. It's kind of strange really. Again, I was talking in an earlier video about the mod having a kind of multiple personality disorder, and I think this is another example of that, where we've had kind of this story-heavy intro, and then this just balls to the wall action scene in the centre, and now at the end we've got this kind of slow horror segment. And again, the transition's quite jarring. You kind of have this big combat with the hunters that we saw last video, and then it's like almost instantaneously like a switch gets flipped and the mod just changes pace completely. Yeah, I mean, transitioning stuff like that can always be quite tough. I think Valve, in the Half-Life 2 games, does a really good job of it, 'cause they tend to kind of weave puzzles and horror elements in with kind of various action scenes. Sometimes even while there's an action scene going on, you'll kind of go into a room and you'll just have this slight kind of pause in the action where you're dealing with a puzzle, or there's some kind of horror element, perhaps a dark room with some strange noises in it, and then you'll emerge back into the kind of main combat area and carry on with what you're doing. Or they either tend to just put it behind a new episode wall, so it's like a new chapter in the story is starting and you kind of get a fresh start with what the player expects. Perhaps something like that could have helped here. So for example, when you walk into a new area, you'd get the new episode title appear on the screen like it does in Half-Life 2. And I always find that kind of resets player expectations, like I just mentioned. It's you've done this section, it's over, and now you're onto something new, and you can kind of wash away a lot of old garbage doing things like that, and the player's excited for what comes next then. In this mod, I felt that you're always kind of expecting more of the same kind of experience, and then when it shifts into something new, like it does a couple of times, it doesn't quite feel natural. The change is quite abrupt. I always think that perhaps another way of doing it would be to have the kind of black and white flashback sequences kind of introduce a new part of the mod, or at least a new gameplay style going forward. So you could always use that as kind of an episode gate or something. Speaking of which, we just saw a flashback just now. That's like the first time we've seen one since basically the beginning of the mod. The story all but evaporates really, which is a shame, because I would really love to find out what's actually going on. That you never really get the full story. Like I mentioned in previous parts on the video, it's just really annoying that you never actually find out what's actually going on here. This area is kind of interesting. So you've got the broken light up above, which kind of draws the player's attention to look up at the top of the shipping container there. But you've also got that valve wheel on the red pipe. At first I didn't really like the valve wheel being non-interactive, as I feel that kind of all valve wheels like that in Half-Life games tend to be, they tend to have a purpose for the most part. But it does kind of put the player's attention onto that pipe, and they might follow it around and look, and then kind of see that they could jump to it from the shipping container. So it works in that way. Here we have I always want to call like broken tiles on the floor like this, I always want to call it kind of desperation detail. This is something I'm guilty of, it's something everyone's guilty of at some point, I'm sure, where you're just thinking, what can I do in this area to add a bit of detail? And aha, we'll break the floor tiles up. Yeah, it's like it's one of those level design cliches, like just placing pipes everywhere in your level and the crates. It's funny how the kind of detailing method changes over the different not genres, but generations of games. So in the Quake era it was, what can I put in this room? I can't think of anything, so we'll just put crates in it, because they're very cheap to render, they're just cubes, and you can just texture them as crates and it works. Great examples include Quake 2, which is basically just a giant warehouse full of monsters for the whole game. Then when Half-Life came along, it was kind of crates and pipes. Oh, pipes. Basically crates with more polygons. And now these days it's kind of crates, pipes, broken floors, broken walls. I wonder what it will be in the next gen. This area kind of reminds me of Portal in a way, when you're kind of behind the scenes messing around in the innards of the facility. So this area is kind of nice. At first I was a little bit confused because as you can see here in a moment, you've got this kind of mini jumping puzzle to get up here onto the top here. And I was trying to like jump up onto the edge of this crate here to kind of get a leg up onto the top, and it wasn't happening. I was trying for a long time. So we'll just skip past that because it was boring as hell. I spent about 5 minutes doing these kind of weird jumps here trying to get up. And I kind of figured I'd have to jump up on something, so I went looking around for props to use up here. And it's kind of nice here because there's a couple you can use. This one's the most obvious, so I grabbed that. But it's just an example of an area where the solution isn't immediately obvious and you have to kind of use your brain a bit. It's not like a glowing prop in the corner like, use this! Which I kind of like. It's strange really, because I always talk about that the player should understand the environment, what's happening, and that the solution should be easy to understand, that the challenge should be in kind of executing that solution. But little areas like that where the solution isn't obvious and you have to search around and find a solution also works really well. So I'm kind of my own worst enemy at times. Because I think if every game ever kind of had puzzles like that, it would probably be very boring. That's just my own kind of preference really with kind of games. What is it with me blowing myself up in this mod? I think at the start of every major engagement in this mod I've thrown a grenade at my feet or exploded a barrel in my face or something. Just trying to make things harder for myself. This area is really nice visually. Really nice to kind of look around and explore the place. I feel like David could have got perhaps a little bit more mileage out of the helicopter fight here. It kind of pins you back into this, I don't know, what would you call this area? A yard. And you don't really have much choice kind of where to move around to or go to. I almost think something like the fight in episode 2 at the end of the kind of buggy chase scene where you're fighting that helicopter in, what was it, like a rail yard I think? And it's kind of dropping bombs and exploding all the scenery. Almost think something like that could have worked really well here. You're kind of ducking in between shipping containers and the helicopters kind of blowing them up and making them fall on each other and, you know, everything like that. You're kind of limited with helicopter fights like this because you have to stay near the ammo box for the rockets. I think there's only one of them in this area, so even if you could move around you'd have to go back there to pick up more ammo anyway. That's kind of another interesting tool that level designers could use to make fights like this more interesting. There's instead of having a ammo box with RPG rockets, you can kind of just place a single RPG rocket in certain areas, and you can kind of get players to explore around by just divvying up the ammo like that. I think I've seen that in a couple of mods. I forget names right now, but there are mods that do that, and it works pretty well. I'm never ever quite quick enough to pick up enemy grenades with my gravity gun. I can never seem to get it right. Usually when I try it, I end up just picking up a grenade that explodes in my face. So I like how as we're getting closer and closer to this mysterious machine in the distance, we're starting to encounter more and more resistance. So we've got the Combine Elite soldiers showing up now. There is kind of this nice build up towards the end where the stakes are slowly but surely getting higher. And again, we've got a nice open-ended area here that you can explore around. It's kind of a shame that you kind of kill all the enemies at the beginning and then nothing else really happens. You've got this big wide open area with lots of angles of attack, and it's just not used for the most part unless you really do just rush in. Checking for secret areas. Those tyre stacks look conveniently well placed to jump up there, but nope. Now here my spidey sense was tingling, and I really wanted to go and have a look over here to see if there was any secret areas, and what do you know? Level designer says no on the rocks. I think that's one of the only areas in this mod where kind of an invisible wall kind of really obviously blocks your path. For the most part, David does a really good job of kind of hiding the level boundaries. You never feel like you're kind of being stifled in your movement. So this combat area, this entire area in fact, reminds me a lot of the second large combat in the mod. If you remember in part 2 of the video, there's the large tunnel with all the little side areas. This area is set up pretty much in exactly the same way. You just have a large central road going right the way to the end, which kind of keeps the player on track. It's kind of very obvious where to go. But you have all these little side areas, little nooks and crannies inside that you can use for cover. They're not used quite as much here as they were in earlier parts in the mod. Generally I think that's because there's a little bit less enemies here. They all tend to run into the centre. I was really expecting like some kind of epic climactic fight here, and while the combat is enjoyable, it doesn't quite reach that kind of epic climax I was expecting. I was expecting something like a Strider to appear, or some gunships or something. Or, you know, combined dropships dropping off a crap load of people. It's nice we get to see the Combined Elite finally, but yeah, it wasn't quite the climax I was hoping for. It's a shame because you're still kind of really far away from the structure, and yet there's no kind of reinforcements to kind of stop you once you've defeated the first wave here. So, as we're getting close to the end here, try and sum up my final thoughts. I think, in terms of combat, I think this is a great mod to look at if you want to kind of see how to create kind of open-ended combat areas with lots of player choice and lots of tactical opportunities for the player. This is a great mod to study, because it's got some of the best combat I've had in a Half-Life 2 mod for a very, very long time. I think the issues arise just from the story being fairly loose. It's not a weak story, it's just very, very loose, I think. It doesn't really give you any closure at the end. Some people might enjoy the kind of mystery of it, but me, I kind of needed something a little bit more tangible, I think. There are some pacing issues with the mod, and the kind of distribution of story elements throughout, so it's very story heavy at the beginning, and you get a couple of flashbacks near the end, but aside from that, it's just kind of the middle is just all about combat with some kind of horror and exploration elements. I think the story elements could have been distributed better throughout the middle. Maybe that would have really helped with the kind of story overall, because as it is, after the first kind of half an hour of mod, you just completely forget about the story altogether. But yeah, overall, I really, really enjoyed this mod. Again, I'm mostly all about kind of gameplay and mechanics when I play mods like this, so lack of story doesn't really bother me too much. It's great when it's there, but I don't mind too much. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.